Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I'm your host, William Stout. I'm here tonight with Prussian Madlon, Leon J. Krelski, and Konstantin. Tonight, we have a very, very busy night with an extremely full docket because this has been a very, very eventful week. Things have actually been happening this week. Um, Of course, we have the No Kings protests, not only going on in the US, but apparently other protests have been popping off in Europe in solidarity or in the base schools that are common on US military bases. But we've also had Israel and Iran trading blows now as Israel lashed out at Iranian nuclear facilities. And unfortunately, we have political violence today in America with 3 people being shot in Minnesota, 2 of which were members of state legislature. But first of all, I want to open it up with greetings and salutations. How is everyone doing this evening?
Outstanding, sir.
About to get
I'm
my
alright.
cornbread out of the oven.
How'd it turn out?
What, the bread? His bread?
Yeah, his bread. Okay, I can't stand push to talk. This is tiring.
No, same, honestly.
Yeah. Prussian, how are you today? I know you've been busy with Radmons. You guys have been releasing a ton of Substack articles as of late. I don't know if I'm ever going to catch up on the reading.
Yeah, it's we've been churning out 2 articles a week. Normally we would publish them on Tuesdays and Thursdays, not to like advertise or anything, but it's just
Oh,
like
I
to
asked.
keep up
Don't,
even to keep up with that schedule is quite the task.
I mean, I asked. Don't feel guilty about advertising. I asked.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean the thing, like I'll just say, like this is just me speaking here, but I honestly didn't think that I was gonna write this much on politics and monarchism. Because like every time I reached a point where I was like, okay, I've written all that I could think about writing. I think I can stop now. But then something else comes up, and I was like, son of a! Now I have something else to write, and sooner or later I have like 5 more articles to write.
I know. And my issue when I'm writing for the MOA Substack is I have to be in a specific mood to write, and with a 10-hour job and everything, it's hard to find time to get into that mood because I'm usually exhausted during the week, and during the weekends, there's other things I either need to get done or want to get done. But it's
Yeah,
definitely something I try to be more habitual about and work on creating better habits about. Constantine, you're recently on our team for the Substack. You said you were working on something a while back? Constantine? Oh,
I
he
I
think
must
it's
think,
be a...
cornbread.
yeah, he's gonna be away for a while with that cornbread. And,
Alright, well,
not to.
I'm gonna move him down to the audience for now then.
Never separate a man from his cornbread.
Understandable,
That's a.
cornbread is wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Us Midwesterners know all about that.
But
Um,
anyway, we should probably get to business. So, did anyone go or witness any of these No Kings protests going on? I personally didn't, even though apparently there was one in my town,
this is
which
the first time.
surprised me because there's only like 30,000 people in my town, so I figured we wouldn't be big enough to have one, but what do I know?
Sorry for cutting in. I didn't know you were done. But yeah, this is like the first time I'm hearing about no kings protests. Like here in America, I mean, we don't have a king, at least not yet, hopefully. But I mean, what? I haven't heard of this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, my mic cut out. Yeah, no, I'm working on something when I'm not being cut off by protesters on my way into my job. Thank you.
yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, no, so I get ready for work. It's like 3:30 in the afternoon. Mind my business. I forgot today's the 14th, so I was like, okay, whatever. Nothing ever happens. Go down the road, see police cars blocking the way. I'm like, oh crap, that's today. And so my brother does a very, very legal U-turn on a one-way. Very legal, very proper. Um, so we turn around and go down a side street, so we're not driving down the wrong way down a one-way, right? And then we wait for five whole minutes while there's like a line of protesters walking down the street. I'm like, dude, we live in a town of 40,000 people. I thought there were going to be like 50 people there. Like, be real. Very conservative town, 40,000 people. No, there were like 500 to 600 people. It was actually kind of insane.
You think most of them were from town, or you think they came out of town because your town was the nearest town to hold the protest?
You want my opinion? I think half of them were paid minimum.
Mm.
Half of them were
'Cause,
paid to show up, and like, yeah, no, probably from like smaller communities outside of town. But like, I can count on one hand. I don't think I saw. I think I saw maybe like 10, like 5, 10 people that were below the age of 30.
like,
There wasn't a whole lot of like kids there, and the kids that were there were probably dragged along with their parents because they couldn't find a babysitter.
yeah, and that's something that always bugged me. You shouldn't take your kids to protest. Too many things can go wrong, and they shouldn't be exposed to that stuff at such a young age.
It's like with the riots in LA. People were complaining that, oh, my baby got tear gassed. Why is your baby at a riot?
Oh no, it's like that's bad, and I don't excuse that at all because that is horrible. But at the same time, as you said, it's like, why did you bring your kids to a violent protest that you knew that there was going to be a confrontation with the police? That's
Yeah,
just
like I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying, why were you dumb enough to bring your baby to a protest?
it's really horrendous, honestly. But what were we gonna say? Leon, did you see anything regarding this?
Um, Personally, no, thank God, because I was not gonna. I don't support it or want to associate it, especially since how it smears what monarchy is. But
Right.
I do know people who were part of it across the Midwest.
I would have
And
figured you would have seen more of it given you're in a larger metropolitan area, but it's
Yeah, I'm surprised
well,
you didn't see it. I saw only like 500 to 600 people.
well, I also didn't go out that much today. I stayed in like my little suburb area.
that's probably helped, yeah. I still don't know how much the turnout in my area supposedly was, but yeah, it was rumored we had a protest today. Which the last time I remember a protest happening in my town was during the infamous Summer of Love back in 2020, but hasn't happened again since then, and there was at least 30-40 people that turned out. Honestly, rather surreal. When you live in a small town and something like that happens, it makes the town feel a whole lot bigger.
Yeah, it certainly does, because as much as I wasn't happy with the protest being effectively on my front lawn, it's nice to see everybody together, even if what I think they're going for is completely wrong and cringe.
But it's interesting that they chose your city, given that another major city isn't far from your town.
Yeah, there are like 3 or 4 bigger cities around me.
But I'm
Two of
trying
them,
to
two of them
I'm
are college towns, so it's like,
I'm trying to reference them without doxing you. That's why I'm being vague.
oh yeah, no, it's 2 of them are college towns, so I don't know why there were protests here and not, say, 20 minutes from here, where there's a bigger college town because of state universities there.
Right.
I mean, you have to remember they were trying to make these protests like across the entire country, not just the major metropolitan areas.
Oh no, the college towns I'm talking about aren't major metropolitan areas, Leon.
No, I know that. I'm just saying. I mean, the goal of this was to make it the entire country.
Yeah, no, and the entire country clearly did not show up because I don't think 1% of my town's population showed up to that protest.
So, do you really just think they were all people coming from out of your town, or?
Oh, I wouldn't doubt a handful of them, and I would play some money that some of them were definitely paid to pull up. I'd put money on it. But
I
that's just me being me here.
I'll be honest. I mean, it depends on your definition of it. Like, I know people who Well, not from like the particular like big city, but maybe like two smaller towns away from it. I mean, I don't know
Oh
if you
yeah,
want to
no,
count
there
them
were
as out
definitely.
of town or not.
Well, yeah, no, they were definitely out of. There were definitely some that were out of town. If we define town as within city limits, like yeah, there were almost definitely people from out of the city limits. But like
Okay, then yeah,
from
because not
like
every town has
towns
them.
from like towns over, probably a handful.
Yeah, but one of the things I thought about is we always talk about paid actors at protests, but I kind of had this thought. It's like, well, there's at least going to be some people paid there, especially if the protest is being held by a major organization, because you got the organizers there, the people that are actually making sure things are set up and going correctly.
Yeah, no, I'm of the belief that this entire protest campaign was astroturfed, like
Really?
to the moon. Yeah, no, because like, let's be real, okay? Let's be real here. Not like most people are centrist like most people are centrist, okay? They're
Right,
not going to
of
be
course.
getting out. They're not going to be like raw death to whatever the current issue is, whatever, right? Like they're not going to be like most people do not go out and protest. So the fact that this was blown up, I was seeing it over Instagram, even on my Twitter feed, which my Twitter feed's like the seventh circle of hell. So it's like if I was seeing that on my Twitter feed, it's astroturfed.
Mm.
Because my Twitter feed is either just like the most insane memes you'll ever find, or just like insane political takes, but nothing like an astroturfed protest. That is not up my alley. It's like Blue Sky. It's astroturfed.
After all these times, I've still never stepped foot on Blue Sky, and everything I know of Blue Sky is hearsay. Does anyone here have any experience with Blue Sky, or
No, I have secondhand experience. Does that count?
no?
Okay, fair enough.
I
I
mean,
know George is what
it's
I know.
dying.
Well, I figured it might have been a flash in the pan. Most of these alternate social medias are like, y'all remember when everyone talked about Gab going to replace what's it called, Twitter,
Twitter.
and
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
then it just
do. I
never
remember
went
that back in
anywhere.
the day.
Yeah, it was.
Leon, you say dying. Does a cancer truly die, or was it ever alive to begin with?
Uh, yes,
But
that's the answer I'll give with that.
I
Fair
feel
enough.
like the problem of why these like niche and new upcoming social media platforms like explode and then fizzle out is because we as a culture associate so much of the internet with very specific websites and terms associated to those websites.
Yeah,
Like
there's Facebook,
Google,
Twitter. There's Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Reddit. That's where all like the social media is.
but
And
like
Tumblr, even then, 10 years ago, was in its prime.
But that's the techno-capitalist oligarchy, as last futurist would say.
We need a techno feudalist oligarchy. Check.
no,
Yeah, yeah,
please.
yep.
Okay,
Nope.
Yavin, get out.
As a
I
tech
think
bro, I gotta say, the last thing I want is one of my people being a feudal noble. We would make good bureaucrats. We would not make good nobles.
I do what I'm told. I would make an excellent bureaucrat.
yeah,
I
I
wouldn't be
do what I'm
efficient.
told as
I
well.
would not be efficient, but I will do exactly what I am told.
I hope
Put it
I
along
would
I
not.
will not. I will not do anything more.
I hope that I will never get anywhere near the levers of power, because otherwise, I'm just going to get sucked away from my life goals.
Mm. But yeah,
True.
I said a long time ago I never want to be in like a heavy executive position because, and it's not because I don't think I can necessarily be trusted with power. It's that I hate the attention, and I could not stand the idea of all eyes be on me. Let me be an administrator. Let me be a soulless bureaucrat in some like some minister of some obscure government agency where I just have to show up to cabinet meetings. But for the love of God, do not make me a monarch or some high noble because I could not deal with the press or like the public eye. I could not
Honestly,
fathom
I would
doing it.
take like the equivalent of a middle management position if it means I could push pencils. and not be on my feet all day. Honest to God.
But where were I was going to make a comment, but I forgot the comment I was going to make. Where were
I
we
think another
before we got
reason
on the
why
comment?
Blue Sky's
Yeah,
dying is because it was marketed as the anti-Twitter. And the entire purpose of it was so that everyone who didn't like Twitter, which the main audience was a bunch of like left wing opinions, was come over here. This is a safe space, and it was never gonna gain. It gained that traction because it was like all like the left wing people decided, okay, let's go over there. This is our safe space, and then it just tailed off because it was like it was just so much of like its head up its own real end.
Well, it's because every single Blue Sky, a lot of Blue Sky users are also on Twitter. And the Blue Sky users that are also on Twitter also have their Blue Sky handles, which is a form of astroturfing it. So it's nowhere near as big as people say it is. Like, yeah, sure, it's the fastest growing social media, but that's dependent on how many users it has and how many users are joining. Like if you're getting 10% more users monthly and you only have 100 users, that's only 10 extra users. Like, that's what
but
I'm saying here. Is it may be the fastest growing, but it is nowhere near the capacity of, say, your Twitters, your Facebooks, your YouTubes, stuff like that.
I feel like I was gonna say, I feel like the biggest problem is that most of these websites miss that early threshold of the internet where they could successfully capture the cultural zeitgeist of the internet. Like the reason Bing and DuckDuckGo and all these alternate social search engines will never surpass Google is because they missed out on the cultural zeitgeist that made Google so prominent. No matter how long it will be, we will always associate the name Google with a search engine. We will always say Google it. That won't, no matter how much.
Nobody says Bing it. Come on.
Exactly.
Nobody says Bing it. Nobody says
No one says
DuckDuckGo it.
Firefox it.
Nobody says Yahoo it. Okay, some people might say Yahoo it, but for different reasons. But hey, Firefox is good. Don't diss
Firefox.
Firefox on my timeline, bro.
Firefox is one of my favorite things growing up with
Yeah, it was
computer lab
peak.
school. My only problem is it crashed really easy once you open like more than 3 tabs, and that was hard when you're working on big projects and such.
You ever work with more than 3 Chrome tabs, dude?
I can. I mean,
I
it
just
gets
want to.
slow, but it still runs.
My
I,
laptop decides to light on fire every time I open more than 3 Chrome tabs.
if you all don't mind me going back to Blue Sky for a moment, I just want to make a quick comment and say that I agree with Leon's observation about how Blue Sky became like this echo chamber, because that's the problem with safe spaces. They become echo chambers.
And
That's all I want to say about
then
that.
because they're an echo chamber, they're inherently not a safe space anymore.
Oh,
Because you can have one opinion and nothing else. Then is it safe for anybody else that even disagrees with an event minorly? Like, let's say
good point. Good point.
let's say you're neoliberal, right? Like you're a neolib, you go on Blue Sky, you're very liberal, but you're pro-life. You're gonna get kicked. You're gonna get canceled off Blue Sky because you're pro-life and not pro child murder.
Yeah, you make a good point there. Yeah.
Right, and I
Ironic.
remember
Democracy
seeing somewhere.
manifests.
I
Yeah, no,
remember
it's Democracy Manifest.
Democracy Manifest. Again, how much I would love for us to be able to use the soundboard in here, but we can. But I remember reading somewhere about the Blue Sky admins with like in the first major month of growth having to address an average of 100,000 reports a day.
Sounds about right. And I think I know what reports you're talking about. And yeah, that sounds about right for that certain demographic of people.
But yeah, and it just comes down to Blue Sky ended up being a victim of its own target demographic, and that it proved that it had all the problems of the original Twitter. The only difference is there was now a lost cause, not a lost cause, but a sunk cost fallacy, because the people who made Blue Sky had a point to prove, and in order to prove the point, they were going to let it keep going on until it drove off a cliff.
Blue Sky is the perfect example of leftist infighting.
It really is, but
Yeah, no, that and like I open up like because I have an Instagram, I scroll reels on my Instagram, and occasionally I'll see like Threads notifications pop up, and occasionally I'll see just whatever BS comes from Threads. Okay, and it seems like a lot like Blue Sky, but like it's just marginally worse.
I'm seeing if Georges P has anything to say, because a while back he said he was on Blue Sky, or at least he encouraged us to try out expanding into Blue Sky, and I'm regret to say I never found the time to do it, even though I said it. Think it's probably a missed opportunity that we haven't tried.
Yeah, it's a missed opportunity. They'll last 5 minutes before they get mad at us for being existent on Blue Sky.
Yeah, it's still worth a shot. But anywho, I feel like as I said at the beginning of the episode, we have a lot to cover, and we've been rambling. We're already 20 minutes in, and we haven't even gotten to the Middle East.
I mean, it was relatively on topic because we moved from the protest to astroturfing, the Blue Sky, which is also astroturfed, and probably because most of the people at the protests use Blue Sky anyway, so it's still relatively on topic. It's not like we
So
went
what's
off
going
the
on in
deep
the Middle
end.
East?
In their normal traditional fashion, Iran and Israel are feuding again.
Yeah, and this time Israel, in order to in order to uh, it prevents Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon, which, by the way, is in violation of a 20-year-old non-proliferation treaty that Iran signed, and now the Israeli Air Force has launched these precision strikes targeting like airfields, military sites, while avoiding civilian casualties. And these strikes were so precise and effective that they managed to eliminate like multiple top scientists working on nuclear weapons, and they've eliminated like the heads of the IRGC, which is like the de facto power center in Iran. And
And
with that, oh, sorry,
not to interrupt you, but I just want to interject something real quick. And the
sure.
thing that amazed me, and I think Israel shot themselves in the foot a little bit, because they went on immediately bragged about how precise those shots were, and that immediately told the entire world that they 110% could have minimized collateral damage in Gaza and just chose not to.
Well, the problem with no the problem with the civilian casualties in Gaza is that Hamas deliberately puts their civilians in the line of fire, and they use them as human shields to protect their weapons and their personnel. And so the problem is how are you going to remove Hamas when they're constantly having when they're using human shields? I mean, at that point, Israel is in a catch-22. They either don't attack Hamas and then allowing Hamas to do like another 7th of October massacre in the future, or they go in, destroy Hamas, and then civilian casualties will get killed in the process because again, Hamas is using them as human shields, which is in violation of international law. I mean,
Right, and
it's tragic. It's tragic, but mind you, Hamas is ultimately responsible for this. They're the ones who started the 7th
I,
of October massacre, and
I'm not
yeah,
disagreeing. I want to see Hamas obliterated as much as the Lex guy, but my point is that if Israel is capable enough to use such precise ammunition that they can take out specific apartments, then why so much is obliterated? So I guess what I'm trying to say is my question is
I think I know what you're saying. I think I know what you're talking about. Sorry to interrupt, but I mean it's. I see where you're coming from, but um, actually, I'll let you finish before I go on with what I
well,
wanted
yeah,
to
so
add.
I'm just saying is like if they're capable and they can prove that they're capable. Like I get it if they're underground shelters, but if they're underground shelters, hitting the buildings overhead isn't going to work either ways unless you're using bunker busters. And if you're using bunker busters, those typically leave the overhead structures relatively intact because they dive into the ground before detonating. So my question is, I don't quite understand why they're putting on such a big bragging show about how precise they can be, even though they know for a fact that most people are complaining about the sheer amount of collateral damage going on in Gaza. It just if there is a serious reason why Israel can't, then it just seems like extremely bad PR on their part.
And if you mind if I interject
Oh,
here, you
sure.
mentioned that Iran signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty, okay? You mentioned that. But what you didn't mention is that Israel has been allowed to possess nuclear weapons that they almost definitely do possess without signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty that every other nuclear power on the planet has signed. They have bombed Syria, I think Iraq, and now Iran to stop them from possessing nuclear weapons. But they have several nukes that they almost definitely have. I'm not a Mossad agent. I wouldn't know. But why is it okay for them to bomb other countries let that are trying to get nukes? Because they're
Well, I mean, Iran has made it obvious. Well, the Iranian regime has made it perfectly clear that they intend to wipe Israel off the map. In fact, in the Times Square, they have like this clock, like this countdown clock for the timeline for their plan to destroy Israel. I mean, they're not hiding the ball. Now, if you want to make the case that everyone, including Israel, should be part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty for the sake of equality of accountability, fine. But my point is that when you have a terrorist sponsoring regime, a totalitarian theocracy, explicitly stating that they want to wipe you out as a country, they want to commit genocide, uh, you'd be. Why wouldn't you believe them? Why wouldn't you take them at their word? So, and and speaking of those strikes, I just wanted to add something quickly. That within days, Israel's precise strikes against against the heads of the IRGC have, I think, that it would push Iran much closer than what would take years of sanctions, which is to push Iran closer to a regime change. Now, I understand that there are people out there who would be skeptical about this, who may see this as a pipe dream, but just hear me out. Like, given how with the IRGC, like with their heads completely gone, and now they're having up like a new line of leaders. Now that you have this power struggle between the hardliners who who are more radical, like more extremists, and they want to keep on pushing uh, for uh, for war, and then you have these self-preservationists among their ranks. And in fact, this power struggle between these two factions have been persisting for a long time. And and I'll provide you an article here, like in the chat, but that goes over this briefly. But basically, as long as as long as the IRGC remains headless or continues to lose leaders over and over from these airstrikes, then this lack of unified leadership could culminate very soon into it could culminate into this conflict between the hardliners and the self-preservationists that would boil over to the point where they'll just eat each other out in the open, and we may very well see like the entire regime collapse and possibly a Pahlavi restoration, given how popular Reza Pahlavi is among the Iranians in the country. Like when you look at the protests, you see them waving the monarchist flag and they chant Pahlavi,
Um,
bless your soul.
Question: while we're on the topic of Pahlavi restoration, do we know who Khomeini's current successor will be?
I don't believe we do.
No.
no, as far as I know, no.
Nah.
Part of the regime, part of the
Khomeini
Iranian
in
regime
19...
is to make sure. Okay.
Oh no, I was just
Ladies
going to
and
say that
gentlemen,
in 1979, Khomeini, I think, didn't even select a successor until I don't even remember when, but the new current supreme leader was his pick. So after the revolution,
right,
I was under the impression that Khamenei was like elected by whoever does it's like a Shuri council or whatever.
oh no,
most
it's
people do it.
basically like fully Roman imperial, like adoption type thing. Like the supreme leader chooses their own successor. There's no election about it.
I'm not very familiar with Iranian politics, so
Neither
I've
am I. I
studied
just know
Iranian
that that's the
politics.
system.
ladies and gentlemen, I forgot to introduce Whitefire, the leader of the UMP, United Monarchist Party of America. Whitefire, say hello to the people.
Hello, how are you?
Okay, I was wondering who that guy was.
Doing well. And you?
Sorry, you kind of just hopped into the conversation. I didn't have a chance to introduce you. I apologize for that.
No, it's my fault. I wanted to once we got onto the topic of the Middle East, I kind of wanted to jump in because I mean a lot of people tend to forget that up until 1979 that Iran was a monarchy. They had the, I believe, the Qajar dynasty that was overthrown in the 1920s, replaced with a republic, or at least a hopeful republic. But then the Pahlavis came in, and they founded
It
the
was never a
Pahlavi
republic.
dynasty.
Yeah, no, it was. I
No,
think it was a military like junta of sorts.
yeah, but Reza Pahlavi, the first Pahlavi emperor, was not. I don't believe he was of noble or royal blood. They basically wanted, I thought, to found a republic, but then he was convinced otherwise that a republic would never work in Iran, and so he founded a new dynasty instead to replace the Qajar dynasty.
Well, yeah,
And
you're right.
Iran,
But, I mean,
until the revolution, was a very staunch American ally. And frankly, I would rather deal with an Iranian monarchy than anything that has to do with the Saudis. I do not trust the Saudis as far as that they could throw an oil rig.
Well,
I can't blame
I
you.
think we all agree on this, and I think let's not try and like say the same things. We're all thinking the same things, you know. And I'm sorry, I know we're all just gonna be talking over each other for the next 15 minutes about the same stuff here. Is that we all prefer the Crown Prince Reza to come to power. We all prefer the Pahlavis over the Saudis or Israelis, and most definitely the Ayatollahs. But let's look at the facts as of right now of the war as it unfolds, not these hypotheticals of like, oh, when is the emperor gonna return, or who's gonna who's gonna annihilate the other.
well,
Leave
no,
it
it's
to
not
the
necessarily
leave it
about
to
the
the man
emperor
with a major
returning.
leave it to the man with a major in international relations to put us all in check here.
Well, I think
I'm sorry. It's just
well, yeah,
Oh,
That's
no,
fine.
no, no, no.
You're fine.
I'm not. There's nothing to be sorry about. You're completely correct.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to deny it. You can make
Yeah.
a fair point.
But ultimately, this is the first situation of its kind where Israel has gone for a potential decapitation strike to cut the heads off the snake because
It is a
Iran
crack
is
in the regime.
well,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
but Iran funds all of the paramilitary groups that surround Israel in Lebanon, in Gaza, and in Yemen, though Yemen is at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula. But the whole point here is that there has never been a situation where Israel has directly gone after Iran in this way after 1979. This is the closest that we have come to a potential, counter revolution, let's say, in Iran since 1979. The circumstances are ripe for that.
I could have swore they like missile attacked them last summer. I thought I heard
But
something like
I
that.
think it
wasn't
was only a
as
few. It was not
Yeah, it
as
wasn't like
strong
such
as
like
this.
a massive attack like this, especially not on
No.
the nuclear side.
No, the confidence that Israel had while they did these strikes is very blatant and out in the open. They definitely didn't pull their punches.
well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to be pretty confident to send missile through someone's apartment. Like, come on, you'd have to have at least some
mean,
intel into that.
I mean, their confidence is well grounded, considering that they managed to set up a drone base inside Iran, inside the heart of the regime, and that drone
Exactly.
base just took down the air defenses, allowing the airstrike to commence.
I remember reading somewhere someone was commenting about Mossad, and they said it's really impressive, Mossad and Israeli intelligence. You never hear about countries getting.
Oh,
Sorry,
pardon?
I dropped my mic. But anyway, I was saying the comment said you never hear about um intelligence agencies getting Jewish people in Israel to betray Israel. But you see Mossad getting people in all sorts of countries who aren't even Jewish, who are ethnically members of their nation, to betray their own governments and work against their own governments. And, part of that, I think, is how convincing a lot of these agents are, but also part of it, I think, is how unlikable the regimes that seem to go after Israel actually are. And
Sky, you're forgetting the third thing.
that is.
Boatloads of cash.
That too. I mean,
Like
yeah, I remember
metric
one.
tons of cash.
Is that supposed to be like a reference to Jews having a lot of cash? I mean, I get the joke,
No,
but...
it's not. It's just a matter of the fact that Israel is a rich country. Israel is
Oh yeah, true.
probably
true.
the richest country in the Middle East. They have a good tech industry. Their pharmaceuticals are great. They have some of the best weaponry in the Middle East. You provide them enough weapons,
Thanks to America.
provide them enough cash. If you provide them enough cash, boom, they're gonna. Yeah, no, you give any Middle Eastern guy cash to not like their government, they'll probably do it. Listen,
Yeah,
Turn
well,
the
it's just
I remember.
you could do that to me.
You
And
never-
you could do that to me. Okay, like they could give me $500,000 to not like the government. I'm like, thanks, I was already doing that, but I'll take it anyway.
yeah,
You're also
I
forgetting the
should-
key word in William's statement was you never hear it. That doesn't mean it never happens. You just never hear about it.
Oh yeah, you do never hear about it. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's because the only thing stronger than Mossad's intelligence is Mossad's counterintelligence.
And the only thing stronger than that is the cash flow of the Israeli government.
Hmm.
I
though
should-
money plays a big role, I think it's not we shouldn't forget that very often the visceral dislike that many Iranians feel towards their government it's very strong, both in the country and of course in the diaspora.
Right.
yeah. So that is one of the reasons why I'm confident in a regime change, but that's all I have to say about that.
I don't think we should honestly be afraid about regime change. The only reason why regime change has a bad taste in so many people's mouths is because the United States decided to do it in the early 2000s in the most stupid way possible.
Oh
And
yeah,
they did it
nation
in a
building.
way that would have never been acceptable to any of the countries where we attempted to do it. Bring democracy to Iraq and Afghanistan, sure. And I'll show you the purple unicorn that comes down from Mount Everest and feeds you candy.
Honestly, listen, controversial take, but we should have kept Saddam in power as a United States puppet to counterbalance Iran.
I understand your point. I mean, the nation building was it's just Woodrow Wilson 2.0. Let's make the world a safe place for democracy. Like,
And then it doesn't
yeah.
work because you implement democracy so crappily in these Middle Eastern countries that have been fighting over religion for the past fucking 1,500 years. Shiites and Sunnis have been at each other's throats for centuries now, like more than a millennium now. They're not gonna get along in a functional democracy.
You also have to remember
Lebanon,
the ethnic
Lebanon is
aspect.
the closest. Lebanon is the closest example of a functioning multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy in the Middle East.
And it's
And
the
even
one that was
that
founded
wasn't
with
even
the
us.
Swiss-
That was the French. The French set that up.
Well, I would also like to point out that it's also the only country out of all these examples that had a Christian majority at its founding.
Exactly, and that's another point. Is you can't just draw lines on a map and expect the people in those countries to get along. That's the problem with the Middle East nowadays. You can't expect these Sunnis, these Shiites, to get along in the same country. It's why Iraq is the way
I
it
think
is.
if you want to go to a deeper level of it, is that it's not just democracy, like, let's vote and decide on things. It goes to a deeper level with what democracy is. And
Of
I'll
course.
just sidetrack us here because I feel like it. I mean, you look at like the partition of the British Raj in the late 1940s, and because I'm mentioning this because you see it repeat again in Iraq and Afghanistan and all these other places, is that democracy isn't just let the 51 over the 49, but because it is and it isn't, because then you have these people, these minority groups, like like the Sunnis in Iraq or the Muslims in like British India. They realize, oh shoot, we have the majority. We are going to be outvoted every time by a pure democracy or by the democratic system. So we do not want to be a part of it. And if you try to enforce this on us, if you try and make sure that we have to submit to the majority, we are going to defend ourselves. You saw this
And
with the
that-
British in India. Yeah, that's how we got to Pakistan. You see this with the Sunnis and even to a lesser extent the Kurds in Iraq. You saw this with the mess that is Afghanistan. Yeah, you just see this
You see
repeat
this in Turkey with
constantly.
the Kurds. You see this in Syria with however many
No,
ethno-religious
no,
groups they've got in Syria.
I wouldn't include Turkey in this because Turkey was not a colony.
It wasn't a colony,
Oh,
sure, but it was lines drawn on a map at the Treaty of Sèvres in 1919.
well,
They kept the Kurds in the same state as
No,
Turks,
what?
knowing damn well they weren't going to get along.
hang
Oh,
on a second. Hang
No,
on a
no,
second,
This is
Con.
you're
I'm
completely
also
forgetting. You're
for
ignoring the
ignoring
whole
the Turkish War of
Independence
Independence right now. Yep, exactly. I
where
am ignoring that right now.
yeah.
For
Hang
the
on a
sake
second.
for the sake of argument, we're ignoring the Turkish War of Independence because
Okay,
had the Turkish
yeah.
War of Independence not happened, we would have gotten an independent Kurdistan. Actually, no, I
Right.
should be talking about this. It's been a long day.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second, Constantine. I have to interject and say something real quick. Technically, the Kurds today are actually part of the ruling government of Turkey because they tend to be more staunch Muslim conservatives and they're actually rather fans of Erdogan. So they're actually doing rather well in Turkey right now.
Oh, neat. Anyway, yeah, I just know they've been in rebellion in like Iraq and Syria for
See,
like 50 years now at
the
this point.
it's
Like with
gotten
like
to the point, and while I'm not a complete expert at the subject, it's gotten to the point where each of the different pieces of Kurdistan has sort of evolved into its own different flavor. Like you have staunch conservative Muslim Kurds in Turkey, but you have the more socialist YPG in like Syria and Iraq that are
and then
more
the PKK
secularist.
is everywhere.
Yeah, it's like it's weird, but
It was
goes to
everywhere.
show that you
Yeah,
see
it was.
these micro governments popping up in each individual Kurd state, and they seem to be in direct contrast and opposition, or dealing with the conditions of those specific regimes. As you see, I'm like, you could see the hardline Muslim Kurds of Turkey as kind of an opposition to the more secular Kemalism that would want to see them assimilated. You can see the more socialist Kurds as a sort of hardline opposition against the more nationalist, the Arab nationalists,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
what I would
We
just
get
like
what
to
you
say
mean.
Arab fascism of the Ba'ath parties in Syria and Iraq.
And that's what I'm saying. Is the Ba'ath parties were a counterbalance to all this like ethnic nationalism in the Middle East, right? The Baathists, we should
No.
have kept the Ba'ath, despite their crimes. They are reprehensible, but
Mate,
we have it
Baathism
there.
is literally Arab nationalism. It is secular Arab nationalism in the vein of Italian fascism.
Yes, yes, I'm agreeing with you.
So
But
saying keep the
we
I'm just
also
saying if you
propped
keep
up.
them in power, the Kurds are going to be in constant opposition because they're going to be constantly oppressed. I'm not
Well, would
saying
you rather?
I'm
Well,
not.
from a
I'm just
geopolitical.
pointing out because you're glazing over it. That's all I'm pointing out.
No, no, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying, in the grand scheme of things, we wouldn't have this problem with Iran if we had merely backed Iraq and Syria as a counterbalance to Iran. Instead of pouring money into the Saudis, I'm not saying we should have overlooked Saddam's invasion of Kuwait, obviously, but if we had kept them in a balance between the Baathists and the Saudis and the Jordanians and the Israelis and whatever, we wouldn't be if we could get that. Okay, yeah, no, never mind. That's like trying to
Okay.
herd cats,
Well,
trying to get
No,
them all to
see,
get
it's
along.
my only opposition to kind of arguments like that of like timing is basically like you can always like it's like where are you going to pick the time in which you say, well, we should have done it this way. I mean, you could have that argument go
Yeah, no,
back to we
it's
should
the
have
power of
supported the Shah in
retrospect,
1979. It's like,
Right.
when do you want to have your starting point,
And,
Yeah, no, it's the
you
power of
know,
retrospect.
one of the things I'm looking back at Iraq in retrospect, and what I fundamentally started to think about what the invasion of Iraq was about.
The Tomb of
And
Gilgamesh, obviously.
Tomb of Gilgamesh.
ha ha ha. But anywho, what I was thinking of is not about weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't about oil. But what I think was going on is that the US government knew Saddam was getting older. They knew he didn't have a good heir that was going to keep the Ba'ath regime together, because his son was even more psychotic than he was. And so what I fundamentally think what the invasion of Iraq was, what Iraqi freedom was the US's attempt to preemptively take over the country and install a friendly regime before Saddam died of old age, and then the country basically fell apart in the power vacuum, which
Well,
would have resulted in it becoming a um sectarian civil war anyway between the Shias that would have likely sided with Iran and the Sunnis that probably would have sided with Al Qaeda or other
or the
extremist
Saudis or
groups.
whatever.
Yeah.
Honestly, the whole Fertile Crescent, the countries that are part that border the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers in the Middle East, they are the most artificial creations imaginable.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
you
because
could
they're lines on a map.
easily,
They are lines on a
well,
map.
exactly, you could easily partition half of Iraq and even Kurdistan and part of the Caucasus Mountains and most of Central Asia back to Iran
And
in,
nothing would change. Nothing would
no,
change.
no, but ultimately, I mean, a lot of those that there's this whole idea, especially among the diaspora, that there's a greater Iranian sphere which has to do with ethnically connected, culturally connected peoples, of which the Kurds are members, and various people in the southern Central Asia are members of that, and I
Afghanistan and
yes, yes, exactly. But yeah, you could
Well,
easily
not really
partition it
Afghanistan.
probably at the Indus River, but no, I think that ultimately, you're never going to have peace in the Middle East until a lot of these internal conflicts are resolved. But you're never going to have any of these internal conflicts
And
resolved until like there's just there. I feel like some sort of overarching force needs to be applied
but
because it's
and
just
and
that's
never going
I
to happen.
and I will sit and now die on this hill. The greatest mistake, the mistake that doomed the Middle East, was when the Western powers, the French, the British, the Americans, chose the House of Saud over the Hashemites. Had we chose to
That
back
was
up
really
the
the
Hashemites,
British.
yeah. But like, as I was saying, if we had chose to back up the Hashemites and help them to unify all of Arabia, the Hashemites would have been a moderating force, as we see they are in Jordan today.
Well, but see,
yeah,
that's
no,
the
the biggest
thing.
mistake ever made was drawing lines on a map in Sykes-Picot when you could
Yeah,
have
well,
just
yeah, but a lot of the peace agreements of World War One, especially in the Middle East, are just an endless road of broken promises. You're just dealing with people who say one thing and they have their fingers crossed behind their back and they totally mean another thing. So, I mean, the Middle East is just it's a basket case, and that's primarily because we just decided that we didn't need to take into account any of these situations. But again, they didn't know what we know now.
Hussein would have been probably one of the better outcomes for the Middle East, probably. And again,
I
he would have
think
been an even better counterbalance to Iran. Not to say that the Iranian Revolution would have happened had he come to power in the first place, but that's neither here nor there. You go far enough ahead in any timeline, it's going to butterfly effect away a million other things.
Exactly.
Leon, you were gonna say
I
something?
think my last 2 cents for this whole thing, my last 2 cents would be one, the great mistake of the Middle East is trying to like somehow allow all these like peoples and nations and tribes to like somehow live like independently, but not really. Because it's the Middle East has always been divided into empires, whether it's the Persians or the Caliphates or the Ottomans or the British or whoever. It has to be power players, and having all these smaller countries do whatever they want and have these like off like these not like these distant identities or ethnos or whatever just allows them to be in constant warfare. And you could say you can blame the oil companies or whatever, but it's just there needs to be some sort of consolidation. And now if that means if this country or this country gets an empire there, in my opinion, so be it. And I back to this other point you guys had mentioned is that Saddam had already, he already threw in his towel when he decided to not negotiate at all and to fight to the death. He was not going to be put back in power. What we should have done, if you wanted to prevent half the problems in the Middle East today, was Jimmy Carter should have backed the Emperor Mohammed Reza to the hilt. He just threw him out to dry because it was like, well, you could be a little more democratic and like soft about things. If he
Jimmy
if he
Carter.
clapped down on that, like the Saudis clapped down on any kind of opposition they ever experienced, so many of these problems would not be problems today. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah,
And
no,
I
Iran would
feel
be
like
a
that's a
solid
good time
ally
to
in the
move
current day.
on.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah, no,
we're
we still
going.
have one more topic, don't we? We should probably
Yeah.
move on from the Treaty of Sevres and the whatever the heck.
Right. And to finish off the evening, we're going to go back to a domestic issue. At the same time the No Kings protest was going on, a political radical of unknown origin and unconfirmed motive, at least as by
Sir,
what I've heard.
it's actually been updated. Apparently, the guy was an evangelical guy who ran a private security firm and was a Walton appointee to the. I want to say it's in News Post. Hold on, let me grab it.
Please do, because I would most certainly care for the update. Last I heard is they just found the No King posters.
Yeah,
in
no, he was appointed to the something about the gubernatorial workforce board or something.
Yeah, he was working
Well,
for the Tim
Workforce
Watson
Development Board.
administration.
Yeah, no, he was working for the Waltz administration, but from what it seems to be, he appears to be a right winger. So
And I'll
yeah,
also
because
say that
he had like a whole hit list. It
you
was the
said
governor.
earlier that it was 3 people. It was 4 people who were shot.
Well, yeah, both
four?
of their
I only heard
spouses.
three
Both of their
because it was
spouses.
Yeah,
Rep,
both
the
the
other
spouses.
senator, and his wife.
One was the senator,
Yeah.
and one was the speaker of the house, and both the spouses were shot too. The speaker
Yeah, no.
of the house and the
Speaker of
her
the House
husband
died, and her husband,
died.
yeah.
The senator and his wife lived.
Oh,
Now-
how horrible! So, what are we
This-
thinking? Obviously it's horrible, and we condemn it because political violence should not be a thing in the 21st century, especially in America. We have a functioning political system or discourse that this shouldn't be the case of what's going on.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's too functioning anymore, but that's
Yeah,
just
no,
my
it hasn't
opinion.
been functioning since at least 2020.
Yeah, but
Okay,
still,
yeah, that's fair. But the point I'm
That's
saying
from a
is,
certain point of view, though.
the
yeah,
point I'm saying is, this behavior is disgusting and it shouldn't be happening.
Well, yeah, but
Absolutely.
also,
Oh, full agreement.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, I feel like I've really started to notice an uptick in, not even to say that it's justice, but vigilanteism or vigilante justice, or what the person carrying out the act
Well,
believes is justice.
unfortunately, America does have a horrific historical precedent with this. I mean, we are the country that coined the term lynching, after all, and
Well, yeah, it goes way back. I mean, tarring and feathering the poor tax collectors who's were just doing their job. It's like shooting the mailman because he got your mail mixed up. But
It's
you
like
know,
shooting the mailman because he dropped off your Amazon package next door.
yeah, exactly. Smashed it right through your window. But I don't know. I mean, wasn't it just like 5 years ago when there was that potential for the governor of Wisconsin or Michigan to be abducted?
Michigan.
by a
Yeah,
group
no,
of
it was
people?
Michigan, and they were anarchists, by the way. They weren't right wingers. They were anarchists that were
No,
going to
yeah.
kidnap the governor.
I mean, a political faction is a political faction. I don't
Well,
really
yeah,
care
no,
who it
but
is,
you can't really call anarchists a faction, considering, like, be real, they don't leave their mom's basement.
Well, hey, no, old school
They're
anarchists did.
Anarchists are either 14 or anarchists, much like libertarians, are either 14 or don't leave their mother's basements.
Well,
I'm talking new school anarchists. Old school
yes.
anarchists got crap done. Nestor Mackno. Yeah, no, I will not diss Nestor Mackno, even though he was an anarcho-communist, because his methods, they worked.
It was an Italian anarchist that murdered Empress Elizabeth when she was in Switzerland. So
And didn't a Polish anarchist shoot McKinley? It was either a Polish or an Italian one.
probably all I know is that the old school
It was
anarchists
Polish.
tended to be more violent.
Right. But I also remember Justice Scalise got shot at that softball game. I forget how many years ago that was.
Oh yeah, wasn't that in like between 2015 and 2018, wasn't it?
Somebody help me out here. I can't remember the year.
I remember I graduated high school already, so it had to.
I don't remember. I was probably in middle school at that point. Yeah.
Thank you, Clements. 2017.
There we go.
Wow,
See, I knew it.
that was a long time. Good God, I was a
It was
junior.
a Bernie, bro. Damn.
I was a junior when that happened. Holy crap, I'm old.
I'm
But,
older.
Oh, but what was I going to say? But it's like I don't. It's just so horrible to see because I'm old enough to remember the Bush administration, like the feeling of unity after 9/11, and this America I've seen now is like so different from that. And I don't know if this is supposed to be a quote unquote return to normalcy in that the unity after 9/11 was just so temporal or.
Jeez, if only things could have stayed that way.
Yeah, it was a very temporary time. I mean, I think though also we have to bear in mind that just the collapse of public trust, it's
Right.
taken like it's a long curve down. So, I mean, there have just been so many falsehoods and lies that have been floating around, either, misrepresented, conflated, or otherwise. And it's just now we're swimming in it. And public trust is practically non-existent, and honestly it got to the point where I can't even remember the last time when I heard somebody say with honesty, you know what, they're the government, I think they know what they're doing. Nowadays everyone's like they're the government, they have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and anybody would be better than this.
That actually circles back to what we were talking about on the first topic with echo chambers. Is you only believe what you're like spoon fed, right? Like most people, like on social media, only believe what they're spoon fed. Like for example, this morning I was almost certain of the fact that because of the No Kings flyers, like Sky mentioned earlier, that this guy who shot that representative or whoever, I don't know if she was a representative or a senator. I think it was one. I think it was both. One rep, one senator. Yeah, no, I was so certain that this guy was like, oh, some like tanky because he was pro-life or whatever. Yeah, no, it just turns out he was just a right-wing nut job.
So, what do you think? Do you think the reason he kept the posters in his car was because he was trying to false flag it, or?
Well, no, I don't know why. You know, we can't really get into his head, assuming that the CIA hasn't already like black bagged him or whatever. But like, we can't really get into his head. I mean, sure, it might have been an idea to false flag it, but apparently, this man also ran an NGO where he was getting like African migrants to settle in Minnesota and stuff, and that doesn't seem exactly like a right wing thing to do. So I'm still a little torn on the matter of if he, like, yeah, he was an evangelical Christian, but yeah, no, evangelicals can be left wing. It's not unheard of. Left wingers can also be pro life. Again, not unheard of. That's why I thought he was a tankies because I noticed he was pro life.
Right,
See,
and Tanky seemed to be oddly pro-life, given
Well,
that
yeah,
they.
you need more men to throw at the wall, right?
Ironic.
You need more men to throw on the front lines.
Yeah, you need more workers for the 5-year plan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you need more
exactly.
workers for the 75th 5-year plan.
yeah.
You need more slaves.
Yeah,
Honestly,
It's
I
literally, it's yeah, no. That's why communists are pro-life. They need more workers. That's why Ceausescu is pro-life. Is because Romania's population wasn't exactly big, so it's like we need more workers in the factories. Ban abortion.
So you're
I
saying
just
that
think that there are
tankies are
so many.
socially. Oh, are you saying that the
No,
tankies are socially conservative?
Socially conservative communists. Yes, I know it seems oxymoronic, but yeah, no,
Huh?
because
It doesn't really. It's not
Stalinism
really.
was socially conservative. It was a very repressive society. From a certain point of view, like Clement said in the chat there, yeah, no, communists can be socially conservative. Ceausescu was a nationalist, a
It
Romanian
actually.
nationalist, but he was also a communist.
I
It
guess that
actually makes
Okay,
more
okay.
sense for authoritarian communists to be socially conservative because strong social values promote the cohesion that you would need in a collectivist society.
I mean,
Exactly.
that is fair, and I guess it would explain why so many communists were homophobic, like Karl Marx, Mao Zedong, and Che Guevara.
Stalin.
Yeah, and Stalin. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Lenin was also against alcohol and any in all forms.
Lenin was a
I mean,
prohibitionist,
every
probably.
Well,
political
Here's the thing.
movement, though
Lenin,
usually like so like libertine in social policy or social beliefs. Almost every political movement sees themselves as a revitalization of society, of social values, with obvious exceptions.
And Clemens makes a good point in the chat where communism and fascism can be very adaptable depending on where you're at. Like we were talking earlier with the Baathists, Arab nationalism, very Italian fascistic, like very fascistic, like Italians, not like Hitler, but like very, very Mussolini like. Whereas, fascism in Germany was more of, well, Hitler like. Whereas it was
populist and appeal,
very ethnically based,
and I
very
could say it was.
revanchist, very hateful towards certain
Okay, what were you
groups.
saying, Will?
Yeah, well, I was going to add into that is that another one of the interesting cultural tidbits we can go on there is how both fascism in Europe and fascism in the case of the Baathists in um
The Arab world.
sorry, I had a brain fart. Yeah, the Arab world is how they appropriated cultural norms and religions, like how the Baathists appealed to Sunni Islam and Sunni nationalism, even though they were technically secularists, and how Germany weaponized the Lutheran Church. The Nazis weaponized the Lutheran Church, even though that Hitler hated Christ. But I forget what I had another thing I wanted to say, but now I've lost it. I've lost my train of thought.
And how communists in certain parts of the world, like in the Soviet Union, for example, early Soviet Union, the Patriarch of Moscow, I think it was. I don't remember. It was probably Moscow. Come to think, it's the Soviet Union. But yeah, no, he pledged loyalty to the Soviet Union. So it's like they would use religion as a source to get what they wanted. Same thing in Romania, specifically in Romania under the Ceausescu regime. It was a very, I guess, it's the opposite of Hoja. Pretty religious. It wasn't paradise because it's communism. It's Romania. First of all, it's Romania. Second of all, it's Ceausescuism. It's not pretty, but like it was very socially conservative in the aspects of it. Banned religion. It was very Ceausescu's Romania was very nationalist to the point where it almost split with the Soviet Union
I think it goes
over
to
the Prague
show
Spring.
a greater trend with most communist regimes in which it's not like purely idealistic like with Lenin or Trotsky, but the more like pragmatic, and they adapt to the needs of like the nation or the state that they're in. And I've seen this trend in order to say that it's common, in which you see a communist, socialist, Marxist regime become increasingly nationalistic and socially conservative because it attempts to combine and kind of find a compromise and synthesis between the two. And I think this is
It's
how we get like national Bolshevism to an extent.
it's
I mean, I would say
Castroism.
that
It's
of China.
Castroism.
Okay. I'm not sure what that exactly is. I've never heard of the
Cuba.
term, but
Cuba.
oh,
Castro.
Castro. Okay.
He was a corporatist in nature and just started calling himself a Marxist because he wanted the Soviet Union bucks. He wanted Soviet Union bucks.
You can say the same
He
thing
wasn't
about
like
like Ho
fully
Chi Minh.
corporatist. But yeah, Ho Chi Minh was a national. Another example is Ho Chi Minhism. He was a Vietnamese nationalist first, and he wanted America's support after the war, but the CIA said no, or the OSS predecessor CIA said no because he was communist. Yeah, no, he was a Vietnamese freedom fighter first, and that's why I kind of have a good amount of respect for Ho Chi Minh in particular.
But I just remember what I want to say. Leon, you were talking about Lenin being prohibitionist.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just remembered the motive behind that, and it's actually a really interesting motive. Before the revolution, vodka production, the production of alcoholic beverages, was actually a monopoly owned by the nobility of Russia. So prohibition, the reason Lenin instituted prohibition is because alcohol and alcoholism had become a symbol of basically the noble oppression of Russia. It was seen as a way to keep the peasantry sedated, basically.
Okay.
I wonder if that's the same
interesting.
reason they killed all those dogs that the nobility liked.
Yeah, well, I love how,
Maybe.
in good Russian fashion, they just completely ignored that prohibition and made their own vodka anyway.
Well, yeah, we did that
They
here.
also they did it too. No, they also did it too, like because the Tsar outlawed it at the beginning of World War One because he didn't want maximum efficiency in the factory, making sure the soldiers are ready, and so both the Tsar Nicholas and Lenin implemented prohibition, and both times they both got the middle finger from like the Russian peasantry who just said, "Screw it, we're gonna make it toilet vodka." I just
Maximum
find that very
efficiency in
funny.
the factories, my brother in Christ, your workers cannot read.
Yeah.
Hey, you don't need to read when all your job is pulling a lever all day.
And, yeah, no, that sounds nice on paper, but, like,
Yeah. But I don't know. We should probably get this wrapped up. It's getting late. Does anyone have any final thoughts or comments on anything we talked about this evening? Anyone the topics? Just last brief minute comment.
I
Well,
definitely wanted to just say one last thing regarding the Middle East, since it's such a brand new topic in terms of Iran and Israel. And I remember, Will, you had mentioned, why doesn't Israel, why didn't they be a little bit more careful in Gaza when they're showing that they could be very precise? I wasn't brought on until after that point, but I didn't want to bring it up until now. That Gaza, you're talking about a territory the size of basically a microstate, and you have millions of people jam packed into that one tiny area. I don't even know the population figures, but I know it's just very densely populated. And
Right.
so the minute you send anything in there, it's you're guaranteed to have collateral damage. There's never ever going to be a
And
potential where that doesn't happen.
I know, and I'm not expecting the Israeli government to like magically keep civilians from dying in a war zone. I understand that there's going to be an inevitable risk of that. What more the point I was trying to make is, we see these built like pictures coming out of Gaza of like buildings that have been reduced to piles of rubble and like are barely standing, and then we saw Israel bragging about how they managed to take out one single apartment. It's like if they can do that, then why so much
Guys,
destruction in Gaza?
Yeah.
I
I
see where you're
think
coming
That
from.
Yeah, I
that
think
was my main.
ultimately it has a lot of that probably in Gaza is psychological, because Gaza, the Hamas has been the thorn in their side for a long, long time, and they know full well that Hamas is literally, it's everywhere in Gaza. They are the population. They're within the population. They're brothers, uncles, fathers, sons. They're all over the place. The education, the schools, the UNRWA schools, they teach kids from the time they're toddlers until they finish education, to hate Jews and to want to kill them and to want to
uh,
be martyred, and all that stuff. They know that Gaza is literally a terrorist factory, and so part of that is just the, maybe, I don't know, psychologically, the complete eradication of the physical structure that is Gaza itself. I couldn't tell you what's going through their mind. I know, though, for a
I
fact
know,
that there was never going to be a war situation in that small of a place where that city got out with much standing.
right? And I know maybe I'm just too much of a bleeding heart on the subject, but it's like it's sad to see, and when you, like I said, when you see Israel bragging about how they can take out entire apartments, and then you just see the pictures and it's just rubble, it makes me sit there and think it's like, could they have done more to keep it cleaner, or
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part. I've never been in a situation where I'm in military command. God willing, I hope I never have to be in a
yeah,
situation where I have to make a decision like that. But
yeah. for me personally, on one hand, I try to be understanding, like with your perspective, other people's different perspectives, but at the same time, I try to look at the reality of the situation from like a cold, pragmatic view, in order to like better understand, like yeah, some of these things, like yeah, these things are terrible, but sometimes they're unavoidable. This is something that so I try to like have a realistic, pragmatic perspective on these things.
I don't
Well,
know.
I think
Anyway,
overall the difference between the two conflicts is that Hamas is this like a terrorist guerrilla organization with hideouts and shelters like under buildings and in sewers and makeshift tunnels. And then with Iran, it's a proper state. This is the big building where we're keeping all the nuclear technology. This is the big building
right.
where all the
That makes
generals eat and have and party and stuff. I mean, there's differences.
Yeah,
That is a
right.
good
and
point.
the tunnels go everywhere in Gaza. It's a labyrinth under the city, and there's access in people's homes, in hospital buildings, in I guess wherever they have their police offices. It's everywhere. There's access tunnels, not just like in the sewer grates outside. There's access tunnels inside, like any building of any kind. You don't know where it is.
Exactly. Two completely different enemies. And I think my last comment I want to make personally is that since we were speaking about that demon of monarchy earlier, Lenin, I think one of his famous quotes works very perfectly for this week. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen.
Indeed,
And this
indeed.
Oh yeah, I think
Yeah, this week's been a decade.
we're living through these one of these weeks as we speak, where decades are happening within
and
days.
it's rather exhausting. So what I think we should do to wrap this up is we need to pray for the future. It doesn't matter who we're praying for, but we need to pray for a more peaceful future. And
Agreed.
with that, please
Indeed.
bow your head and
Agreed.
join me. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you for joining us this evening on Monarchist Minute. Um, we hope to see you again next time, same place. Until we meet again. If you're listening to this on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. If you're listening to this on one of our streaming services, hit whatever button it is that you get constantly notified whenever a new episode drops. If you want to reach out to us, get a hold of us on social media or get a hold of us via our email. And until we meet again, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you and good night.